Senior diplomats from the US and Russia have met in Geneva for high-stakes talks on Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said dialogue will continue over Moscow's security demands and that it expected written responses from Washington next week. Moscow wants troops from NATO member states to leave Romania and Bulgaria as part of security demands it's seeking from the US-led alliance. Mr. Lavrov's talks with U.S. Secretary of State are the latest move in efforts to defuse soaring tensions over Ukraine after Russia massed troops on its border with the country. A series of meetings last week failed to produce any breakthrough. Western nations fear Russia is planning an invasion of Ukraine, almost 8 years after it annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. Moscow insists it has no plans to invade the former Soviet republic, but it is threatening unspecified military action if a list of demands is not met. They include a promise by NATO to never allow Ukraine to be part of the defense alliance. And Julia Chapman joins us live from Moscow. Julia, we've heard from Mr. Lavrov, but not from Mr. Blinken so far. He says he expects Washington to have a written response to Russia's demands by next week. As an outcome, how would you assess it?
Well, certainly we will wait for the assessment from Antony Blinken in the next few minutes when he comes out to explain to the media how these talks went. An hour and a half long they lasted. Certainly they do seem to have made some progress. At least they are going to continue dialogue. That is certainly a very important takeaway from these talks. And if the United States does agree to respond in written form to Russia's security demands, then that would certainly be a satisfying outcome from Russia's perspective. It has made this list of proposals that it wants over European security. And Sergei Lavrov was very keen to stress that this isn't just about Ukraine. This is about the wider European security infrastructure. Russia, as you said, wants Ukraine never to be a NATO member. It wants the military bloc not to position offensive weapons in Eastern European countries on Russia's border. These are all things that Moscow views as a threat to its own security. And that is why it has made these demands. Now, critics would say that Moscow is trying to reestablish a sphere of influence, push NATO further west away from Russia to allow more of a buffer zone. And that is concerning to many people, not least those in Bulgaria and Romania, who, of course, see NATO as essential to their security. But indeed, it does seem that there will be more dialogue going forward after the written responses are received by Moscow. And when asked whether President Vladimir Putin could meet with the U.S. president as well, Sergei Lavrov said that that was a possibility, depending on the result of the written responses.
But Julia, these written responses so far, it's unlikely that Russia will get what it wants in terms of the list of demands that it submitted last month. Does it suggest any lack of sincerity on Russia's part so far?
That has been the speculation. These demands were so ambitious, so unrealistic from the point of view of the West that it was thought that Russia couldn't possibly be serious, almost as if it was trying to create a pretext to invade Ukraine if dialogue failed. It's possible that Russia does have some sort of middle ground that it's looking for, and that is certainly something that has been discussed in these recent weeks of dialogue, areas where they might be able to come to some sort of an agreement, some sort of common ground with regards to drills and transparency over military drills, the positioning of weapons and troops in Europe, certainly being among them. NATO has been very clear that Russia will not have a veto on anyone's NATO membership, including that of Ukraine or Georgia, going forward. But there are some areas where there could be concessions made to Moscow, although, of course, there would be a lot of caution as to giving them too much ground. But certainly it's unclear whether Russia does have any intention to invade Ukraine. It insists that it doesn't. But the significant military buildup on Ukraine's border has certainly led to speculation that that is possible.
Of course, Mr. Blinken, before heading to Geneva today, he was previously in Berlin speaking to major European allies over what kind of reprisals Russia might face if it in any way crosses that border into Ukraine. And what sort of reprisals could we be looking at?
They are looking at a range of tools. Of course, as Joe Biden, the U.S. president, suggested earlier this week, not all allies are united on what those tools could be, what that response could be, although they do say it would be a firm one. But some of the things being considered are, of course, further sanctions. Some more dramatic suggestions, of course, include cutting Russia off from the SWIFT system of international transactions, going further to stop Russian banks from using the dollar in any transactions. And of course, Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, is also possibly on the table. Germany hasn't confirmed that it would consider stopping that project. It does want to see it completed, but that is being considered to be one of the tools that could be a lever of pressure on Russia to prevent it from invading Ukraine.
And thanks for that, Julia Chapman speaking to us there from Moscow.